Throughout the history of the worst Pokemon series, we've covered some pretty forgettable Pokemon. Some of the Pokemon that are considered forgettable that we've covered in this series so far include Maractus, Lumineon, and Tropius. Generally speaking, if a Pokemon is forgettable, it's usually because they aren't very good competitively, which is the case for this episode as well. Since Parasect beat out Rapidash in the most recent poll for the worst Pokemon series on the community tab, in this video, we'll be discussing if Parasect is the worst Pokemon or not. We'll take a look at Parasect in the standard Generation 7 settings of Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, as well as Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee. If you guys want to support the channel, make sure you leave a like as it helps the channel tremendously, and subscribe if you haven't already. Now before we get too far into this, it's very important to understand that this series focuses on Pokemon from a competitive battling standpoint, which is very different than battling against gym leaders or NPCs throughout the story mode, and of course the anime battles. If you're newer to competitive Pokemon, I recommend you check out the description so you can have a better understanding of how competitive Pokemon battling works. We will rate Parasect on a scale 1 to 5 based on its offense, defense, versatility, move pool, and overall viability. If Parasect doesn't excel in any of these categories, then it might just be the worst Pokemon out there. Keep an eye on your subfeed for the next poll for the worst Pokemon series, and now let's talk more about Parasect. So taking a closer look at Parasect, it is a bug and grass type Pokemon introduced in Generation 1 with the abilities Damp, Dry Skin, and Effect Spore. Parasect has a stat line of 60 HP, 95 attack, 80 defense, 60 special attack, 80 special defense, and 30 speed. These stats don't really look all that great. Just like a lot of other Pokemon that have been featured in this series so far, none of these individual base stats even break 100 points, and something that's interesting that someone put out in the last worst Pokemon poll comment section is Parasect actually has a slightly lower base stat total than its opponent Rapidash's pre-evolution Ponyta. So it isn't too much of a surprise to see why Parasect won the vote last time. Before we dwell too much on why Parasect is a bad Pokemon competitively, let's take a look at some of Parasect's positives and how it can be good. So for the first positive, Parasect has 3 pretty usable abilities. None of Parasect's abilities are particularly great, however, but they are useful in their own unique ways. Damp is cool to be immune to moves like Explosion or even Mind Blown, which happens to be a fire move which you're 4 times weak to, although only one Pokemon gets it. Dry Skin makes Parasect immune to water attacks, and Effect Spore, although it is a little bit gimmicky, it's really not a bad ability to have, and it can be good in some situations. I would say Damp is probably the worst of the 3, but the other 2 are still pretty decent. Parasect also has some decent support options. Parasect has some usable support options in singles or double battles with its signature move Spore, as well as moves like Rage Powder, Reflect, Synthesis, Aromatherapy, and Knockoff. And that's pretty much it for the positives. I really couldn't think of any other notable Parasect positives outside of maybe a couple other moves that Parasect gets that are kinda cool, which we'll cover in the moveset portion of this video later on in the ratings. But for now, let's move on to Parasect's negatives. So for the first negative, Parasect has 2 4 times weaknesses. This is the thing that stands out the most to me about Parasect, as there really aren't that many Pokemon in the game that have multiple 4 times weaknesses. Parasect is 4 times weak to Fire and Flying, which is absolutely terrible, and has 4 other weaknesses on top of that. Now to give Parasect some credit, Parasect does quad resist Ground and Grass, so I guess take that Torterra, and resist 3 other types as well. One of those types is water, however, which is rather redundant if you have dry skin, since you're already going to be immune to water anyway, but at least it's something for Parasect. For the next negative, Parasect is outclassed by so many Pokemon. Parasect lost its Gen 1 niche of being the only Pokemon with Spore a very long time ago now, so it doesn't really have anything that other Pokemon can't do. As a bulky grass type, it's pretty much outclassed by things like Tangle in the lower tiers, and offensively you're better off using a Pokemon like Levani, which coincidentally has the same exact typing as Parasect. Poor coverage moves. It seems like Parasect is supposed to be more of an offensive Pokemon, as its highest stat is attack with 95, but it doesn't really have the coverage to match it at all. The only decent non-stat move that Parasect has is Knockoff, unless you count Dig as a good coverage move, and that's really scraping the bottom of the barrel. The problem with Knockoff, however, though, is although it's good in Generation 7 setting, in Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon it doesn't even exist because there are no held items, meaning Knockoff is just a useless move. And that's something that I think is a problem for not only Pokemon like Parasect, but pretty much every Pokemon included in Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee. These games don't include all of the moves that Pokemon had in previous games, since we're lacking some move tutor moves as well as the fact that Brita doesn't exist at all, meaning there's literally no egg moves in this game. That's part of the reason why I wanted to include more Generation 1 Pokemon, as Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee just came out, so I can discuss how they are in Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee as well as in Ultra Sun Ultra Moon, as they do behave differently, and both of them have their own competitive settings their own right. Although Let's Go isn't taken as seriously, it still is a different competitive format that I'm sure people will play and enjoy as the life cycle of Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee goes on. And for the last negative, low speed. Parasect has a very low speed set of 30, which I guess makes sense as it is supposed to be a zombie mushroom crab, and zombie mushroom crabs can't possibly be all that fast. Now whenever people see a slow Pokemon, they tend to think of how it can benefit from a move like Trick Room, which I guess is true to an extent with Parasect, but why bother going through the trouble of setting up a Trick Room just to switch into a Parasect? I guess you could go into Parasect and go for Swords Dance to boost your attack, but then that's another wasted turn for Trick Room just to send out a Parasect. And that's pretty much all for the negatives. I'm sure I could nitpick a little bit harder and find a few more, but for now, let's move on to the ratings. For offense, I'll give Parasect a 2.5 out of 5, which is a somewhat respectable rating in offense, as its offense isn't completely useless, but it certainly really isn't all that good. 95 attack isn't the worst. Overall, Parasect's offense is almost useful, and whenever something is almost useful or almost decent in the series, which in itself really isn't that great anyway, I like to give it a middle of the pack rating of 2.5. Access Swords Dance is also nice to boost your attack, so you do get some points for that. For defense, I'll give Parasect a 2 out of 5. Parasect has 80 in both defenses, which really isn't all that terrible, and 16 HP, which is rather low. It does have a decent amount of resist, but overall I would say they cancel out by its weaknesses, especially the abysmal 4x weaknesses it has to fire and flying. For versatility, I'll give Parasect a 1 out of 5. There really just isn't much versatility to Parasect, outside of maybe running Effect Spore over Dry Skin, which barely counts as any versatility at all. In the Let's Go metagame, there's no abilities, which arguably makes Parasect slightly worse as well, and there's just really not much going for this Pokemon in terms of different sets you can run. For Movepool, I'll give Parasect a 1.5 out of 5. Parasect's Movepool isn't totally worthless, as it does have access to some nice moves like Spore, Leech Life, Swords Dance, and Synthesis, but overall it really isn't great at all. Its coverage is nearly non-existent, and there's only about 8 or 9 moves that are somewhat usable on Parasect, and that's me being a little bit generous. And for Viability, I will give Parasect a 1 out of 5. There's virtually no reason to ever use Parasect in a competitive setting, as there isn't anything that I can do particularly great, and there's plenty of other Pokemon out there that can do the same job as Parasect or even better, which makes you wonder why would you even want a Parasect on your team, unless you specifically want a Pokemon that's 4 times weak to fire and flying, which doesn't make any sense. Even if you do want that part of a reason, I would still argue that Levani is the better option here. In terms of some movesets you can use, first for Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, we have a pretty expected set from Smogon, which is Parasect with the leftovers, Dry Skin ability, which I guess could be Damp or Effect Spore if you really want to, Max HP, Max Defense, Impish Nature, Spore, Synthesis, Seed Bomb, and Knockoff. The only other move you might want to consider is Leech Life for Bug Stab, and some health recovery, but outside of that there really isn't too much more to Parasect. In terms of a Parasect set just for Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee, you might want to try something like this. Parasect with the Careful Nature, Spore, Leech Life, Brick Break, and Leech Seed. Parasect doesn't have access to Knockoff, Seed Bomb, or Synthesis in Let's Go, which really hurts it. Luckily it still has access to Spore, which is a great move in itself, and instead of Synthesis, we're limited to recovering with Leech Seed to recover health, which isn't as good, but at least it's still usable. Now for some team partners for your Parasect, you're definitely going to want something that resists fire and flying, since you're quad weak to both of those. Strangely enough, Magcargo pairs pretty nicely due to typing of Rock and Fire, which resists both of Parasect's quad weaknesses, as well as Parasect being immune to water thanks to Dry Skin, and resisting water otherwise, which Magcargo is 4 times weak to. Parasect also resists ground, which Magcargo is weak to, so they actually cover each other's typings pretty nicely. In terms of a partner for Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, Mega Aerodactyl works nicely for similar reasons to Magcargo, although Mega Aerodactyl is already one of the best Pokemon in Let's Go, so that really isn't too much of a surprise that it would pair nicely with Parasect. Another low tier option for Let's Go could be Onix, but I honestly think that you're just better off using different Pokemon besides Parasect, but to give Onix some credit, it does fulfill a similar role to Magcargo would, as it is 4 times weak to water, which Parasect resists, and it does resist fire and flying, being a rock and ground type. And that's it for Parasect. Is Parasect the worst Pokemon? Let me know what you guys think of Parasect in the comment section down below for a chance to have your comment featured in the next worst Pokemon video, like this comment right here. Personally, I think Parasect is one of the worst Pokemon we've discussed so far in this series, since it doesn't really seem to do anything well, and doesn't seem to really ever add anything to your team. Thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure you guys leave a like if you enjoyed it, this helps a ton, and subscribe with notifications turned on if you haven't already so you don't miss a future upload. Have a great rest of your day. I will see you guys next time, and bye bye.